You've tuned in to the #Lita podcast, where love is the answer. Before we get started today, I wanted to tell you just a little bit about my podcasting experience and encourage you to start one for yourself if you've been thinking about it. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. Yes, free. Second, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Third, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you. You don't have to do a thing, and it can be heard on many different podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google. Finally, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Super easy. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm, ANCHOR.FM.
You are listening to the #Lita podcast, hosted by author, speaker, and coach Jeff Connor. He invites you each week as he has conversations to discover how others are using love to change the world. Listen in and find what inspires love within you, so you can go out and share it with the world. Remember, love is the answer.
I have a dream today.
Hello, and welcome to another week on the #Lita podcast. This is going to be a great week. My name is Jeff Connor, and I'll be your host on this hour plus as I talk to my guest this week, Sayre Darling. Sayre and I are going to talk about some new ideas for having tough conversations that can actually better your relationships. Before we get into today's episode, I want to thank you so much for joining me. I want to thank you for being a part of this community, and I want to invite you to become an even more active participant within this community by going to the website, www.litaforlife.com, and subscribing to the Take 5 Friday newsletter. The Take 5 Friday newsletter is just a real short email that I send out on Friday, kind of in the middle of the day, gives you an opportunity to take a little break from whatever you've been working on and see a little bit about my upcoming guest. Here are some interesting quotes that I've been thinking about this week. I talk about some of the books I've been reading and why I've enjoyed them. And if I've come across any cool people or other cool things, I'll include those as well. So it's just kind of a nice little 5-10 minute break to get a little bit of an update on what's going on here at the #Lita show. While you're on the website, go ahead and click on over to our Facebook page and make sure you like that page. And then get involved with the conversation. We've got a group started as well, so you can join our Facebook group. The cool thing about these conversations is, and especially as we seek to try to understand ourselves and each other, is that we sharpen one another's saws. So even though we don't always agree or see things the same way, by having these conversations, and after today, I hope we have even better and higher quality conversations with one another. We sharpen our saws, we get better, it helps us learn, helps us to grow. And that's the way that we build this community. So please, go on over there, like the page. Also, make sure you're reviewing this podcast on whichever platform. If you're on Spotify, leave me a review there. If you're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, there's several other here on the anchor.fm website. If you come to that through the website, there's a place to leave comments and start conversations. That's how we grow the community. Make sure you're sharing it with your friends, and let's just get it out there. Let's keep growing this community. Each week, the numbers are growing, and so I'm just thrilled that you've joined us and are becoming a part of this growing and dynamic community that's all about promoting the idea of love is the answer. And if you or someone you know would make a great guest on the #Lita podcast, go to the website again. There's a spot on there to schedule a little 30-minute conversation with me, and we can see how that'll work. I'm happy to talk to anyone and see if it's a good fit. The only real basis is that I'm looking for folks who are out there demonstrating and showing how love is the answer by putting love into action. So head on over there. Let me know. Shoot me an email if you know of some people or if you've got some show topics that you'd like to hear about. That's how we're going to keep making this better and better. All right, now on to this week's guest. As I mentioned, Sayre Darling. Do you find it difficult to have tough conversations where the stakes are high and emotions can run even higher? I know I have, and I still do. And unfortunately, we often either really botch these types of conversations or we avoid having them altogether. This week, Sayre Darling is my guest. Sayre and I have been friends for a couple of years, and we met at a heart-based leadership breakfast we both attended. Over the years, I've gotten to know Sayre and hear about her work helping others have crucial conversations. She has great insights into what it takes to have these meaningful and purposeful conversations that enhance relationships rather than erode them. So if you, like me, struggle with confrontation, then this is going to be a great episode for you to hear. You'll get some actual strategies to help you better communicate with the people who are important in your life. Now, we had a little bit of technical difficulties with our connection, and unfortunately, our goodbyes at the end were cut off a little bit. I've done my best in the post-production here to preserve the essence of our conversation, and I think although the ending is a bit abrupt, I just don't want you to be surprised by that, but I think you're really going to enjoy the conversation and be able to get a lot out of it. A little background on Sayre. Sayre unknowingly began her professional journey when her parents gave her the name that describes what she does, Sayre. Sayre began her career in corporate communications, including media relations, internal communications, brand development, and marketing communications, planning and implementation. Along the way, she was asked to create communication strategies for organizational change, transitions, and crisis management / labor issues, regulatory and legal mandates, and crisis and mitigation. All of her life's work has helped her create a consulting and leadership practice for entrepreneurs, leaders, and organizations working at the intersection of leadership, culture, change, and growth. She has developed a unique combination of skills to facilitate cross-functional projects across an entire organization to create alignment, excellent communication skills to drive clarity, the ability to make the complex simple, a calm demeanor to infuse confidence, a positive perspective to shift challenges into opportunities. As Sayre often says, never waste a good crisis to drive change and growth. Sayre received her coaching certification from the Hudson Institute in Santa Barbara, California. She received her master's in business communications at the University of St. Thomas and her bachelor's of arts in broadcast journalism for the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive into this wonderful conversation on how to have tough and crucial conversations. Enjoy. Sayre, welcome to the #Lita podcast.
Thank you, Jeff. Great to be here.
And I'm very excited to have you and dive into our conversation today because we're going to talk about crucial conversations.
That's right.
Excellent.
The types of conversations that stump everybody.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll get into some examples and you'll give us some techniques on how to do that. But, this is the #Lita show, and it's probably not too big of a leap, but just for some people, how do crucial conversations play into this idea of love being the answer? What's love got to do with it, in other words?
Well, two things. First of all, the conversations you dread the most are oftentimes those conversations that happen with loved ones, where keeping the relationship is so critical to impacting your life and impacting their life. So when you are having to talk to someone about sexual intimacy or cheating or a rebellious teenager or asking in-laws to quit interfering, these are very difficult conversations, first of all. And second of all, because we love these people, we have a much higher vested interest in protecting these relationships. So they're very, very important to us to solve and be able to move forward from. So love has everything to do with it.
Excellent. You mentioned we call these crucial conversations. What's the makeup of a crucial conversation? Why are they different than a normal everyday conversation?
Sure. Well, Crucial Conversation was actually named in the title of a book, Crucial Conversations. And it's tools for talking when stakes are high. It's actually written as a business book, but these can crucial conversations can be incorporated into every facet of your life. Crucial conversations are defined as when opinions vary, when the stakes are high, and when emotions are running strong. So like I say, the results could have a huge impact on your life. And these are the conversations we dread the most. And they're also the most important conversations to our lives.
Do you have some examples of what might constitute a crucial conversation?
Sure. I can name a few instances, but also keep in mind that a crucial conversation doesn't have to fit this list. It's any conversation where opinions vary, stakes are high, and emotions run strong. And let me just ground the conversation, Jeff, in the times we're living in right now. Most of our conversations seem to be crucial right now, whether we're dealing with money issues, career change, multiple generations living under one roof, our beliefs, our choices, lifestyle choices. People talk a lot about drinking too much and eating too much to cope with this quarantine period. And so there are a number of different types of conversations that are considered crucial conversations. Here's just a few examples. In the professional side of things, talking to a coworker who behaves offensively or makes suggestive comments. In today's world, it could be a coworker who likes to monopolize the conversation, talking only about their family situation that is in such disarray to a point where it distracts the group meetings, the online group meetings. When you're asking a friend to repay a loan, frankly, just about any conversation around money, we feel uncomfortable about. Opinions vary, stakes are high, and emotions run strong.
Yeah, that's a good example of just asking someone who owes you money. I know my wife struggles with that when we split the grocery bill and then I forget to give her my share, and I try really hard because I know it makes her very uncomfortable to ask me to give her my share.
Yeah.
Why? What makes that so hard?
Well, a lot of those conversations that become crucial really get back to our fundamental beliefs, whether we know what the belief is or not, whether we can name it or not. It reveals key beliefs and perspectives of our that we were brought up with.
Do you have some ideas, some insight? So let's just take this, what we just talked about. My wife and I go to the grocery store. We get a total. She pays for it with her credit card. Our arrangement is that after we get home or whatever, we add it all up, and then I pay her half. And sometimes I will not do it right on the spot, and then I forget, and then she finds herself needing to remind me.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of things would drive her to struggle with bringing that up with me? Do you have any kind of idea of that?
I'm smiling when you ask that question, because what comes to mind immediately is in relationships that I have had, reminding people to do things drives me crazy. For me, the issue is, well, why are you ignoring me? If this is such an important part of our relationship, of maintaining a status quo in our expenses and our food budget, then why should I have to remind you? Or, the issue could be around money, and maybe your wife has experienced particular beliefs about money, that there's going to be a scarcity, that you not paying will add up into something much bigger. For example, let's say you forgot to pay for a couple of weeks. Well, that gets to be a really difficult conversation when you have a pattern in place and things build up. So it could be any number of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine, just like what you said, the first example with it being kind of a story that you're creating in your mind about why I didn't pay, it's not important to me. That's a story that you would create on your end of things, and a way to, I guess, label my behavior in a way that makes sense to you.
Well,
But it's
people
not necessarily the right story, is it?
correct. People create stories for lots of different reasons, and that is one of the key goals in the steps you go through in hosting a crucial conversation, is to get past the stories in your own head and make it a win-win conversation. Figuring out what you are committed to. You and your wife are committed to staying together. So when you come together for a crucial conversation, you have to get past your storytelling to do that.
And I'm sure we'll get into some techniques on ways
Right.
to do that. Good.
Right.
Good. So before we get kind of into the actual nuts and bolts of these crucial conversations and how to make them effective, and we'll talk maybe a little bit about what makes an effective crucial conversation. Yeah. What led you to this? You mentioned a book, and I know I've read the book. I have the book somewhere on my bookshelf, and I'll make sure I post that in the show notes so people can link to it if they want to get a copy. Excellent book. I think Vital Smarts, is that the name of the company?
That is exactly right. Vital Smarts is the company.
So I'll make sure to put all of that out there. But what drew you to this line of work? What about your history and your experience in life really made you want to dive in and get professional, I guess, when it comes to having crucial conversations?
Well, my business is communications, and I have worked in corporations. I've worked with entrepreneurs for many years. And one of the things that I learned was through a number of crises I had to handle, meaning organizations involved in lawsuits and a number of other very difficult situations. The ability to have a conversation on solving the issue was really the larger crisis. Whether the crisis was a lawsuit, whether employee embezzled money, no matter the crisis, as big and awful as that externally visible event was, the most important thing is the conversation that happens behind the scenes in order to solve the issue. So, a lot of times people will say, it doesn't matter what happens, it's more important in showing how you can recover from something. And that's the tool that crucial conversations can give you, is the ability to recover gracefully and find a new way forward. And so in communications, I had to learn how to host these very difficult conversations.
Do you have, does a particular memory stand out where you came in and helped someone have a crucial conversation? Like what was going on and what was happening before you got involved to necessitate your involvement?
I've been involved in a number of different types of crises, employee embezzlement, lawsuits, legislative and regulatory mandates. And the most frequent issue that comes up when I counsel executives about how to handle those situations in that conversation that leadership has to have behind the scenes is not to react. How do you respond versus react? And that is a part of what the crucial conversations techniques will teach you how to do.
What's the difference between responding and reacting, since you made a distinction there?
The difference between reacting and responding is that responding means that you are choosing how you respond to the other person rather than speaking in the moment and doing so with a lot of emotion. When you respond, you take into consideration the context, the person delivering the comment, whether they are just speaking out of emotion or whether they are giving you a sound, factual perspective of what happened. And a reaction is primarily noted by storytelling, high emotions, and you're not offering any, you are not offering any forward-thinking conversation in terms of, so how do we get out of this? How do we solve the problem? What's the next step?
So what's the, to me, it seems like it could be really hard. I know in my life, I've struggled at times with choosing to respond versus reacting. And frankly, sometimes it feels completely out of my control. When I react, I'm done and like, why did you do that, Jeff? How does one get to the point where they can bring about a more thoughtful response rather than that kind of immediate knee-jerk reaction to a conversation?
Well, the difference between, let me start again. The distinction I want to start defining and sharing with the audience is the difference between conversation and communication. Communication is the exchange of information, whereas conversation includes a lot more information that you get from what the person's energy is like, how much emotion they have. Do you want to stay in relationship with someone when you're in conversation versus just speaking at them? So when you are communicating, it is very easy to react, and your emotions take over, and you don't have a dialogue, you have two monologues where both people are speaking quite fast with high emotion to each other, and you think you are coming away with a shared understanding. But in fact, you have two monologues, not a dialogue, and each person comes away from the conversation with a different perspective, okay? When you are having a crucial conversation, you are having a dialogue. The entire purpose of a crucial conversation is to create a shared pool of meaning. So when you are having a crucial conversation, the pace of the conversation has to be much slower. You are taking in data points from the energy you are exchanging. Those times when someone is speaking calmly, but their hair is about ready to start on fire because they are so upset they can hardly control themselves. So you factor all of that in, recognize it, acknowledge it, put it on the table, talk about it, and create a shared pool of meaning.
That sounds lovely. And I sit here and I think, like right now I'm sitting here talking to you. We probably wouldn't consider this a crucial conversation, would we?
No, unless your emotions are running high, you're feeling uncomfortable, and opinions vary, but I don't sense any of those factors to be present.
Yeah, because as I sit here and talk to you, I'm very calm and,
Yep.
open and flowing. What I notice about myself, Sayre, is when I get into crucial conversations, even before I open my mouth the first time, I am highly activated at times where I could be visibly shaking, and
Right.
I have a really hard time thinking. I think about going into high stakes negotiations. I think those would be considered a crucial conversations, and
They definitely are.
my emotions will seem to get the better of me at times, where it makes it really hard for me to think on my feet, where it makes it hard for me to get out my my half of the dialogue sometimes, because I'm trying to in this emotional cloud, in this activated state. I mean, physical activation of my body, where visibly shaking. My voice at times, I've noticed, will kind of squeak out on me as I'm kind of living this inner turmoil during these conversations. I guess the end question here is, how could you help me? How could I learn to calm myself in the face of these crucial conversations so that they can become more effective? Because I think I hear what you're saying about adding to that shared pool of meaning, which is so important, because so often I think what you describe, when people are tense and they're in two monologues, they're not really listening to understand the other person. They're really trying to figure out how to counter what the other person is saying and somehow convince them that what they're saying is right. And so they're not listening for understanding, they're listening to figure out their next response. Is that a good characterization?
That's partially, yes. The first thing you can do is recognize that you are in a reaction mode versus a response mode. Let me tell you about a little technique. It's called noticing and calling it out. So let's say you have been asked to be engaged in a crucial conversation. First of all, to set up a crucial conversation correctly, you want to ask someone to join you in a crucial conversation. You don't want to rush it and put a timeline on it and say, okay, I've got 15 minutes to talk to you about this. Well, that won't work, because that puts us in that immediate fight or flight response. And when we are in the fight or flight, we are not listening. Our mind goes blank, and we are not able to activate all parts of our brain to come up with really great solutions.
Since you bring up the fight or flight, I just want to point out that I think that has a lot to do with my becoming activated during these. And I've actually gone through and did some therapy with a therapist to help me calm, I guess, my activated state prior to going into these. And it actually worked. If anybody's interested, the method I used, it's a fairly new one. It's called Safe and Sound Protocol, and it just uses kind of music and different frequencies, and I don't know how it really works, but you kind of just sit there and listen to music. I did this for an hour a day for 5 days straight, and it had a profound impact on my ability to enter into these crucial conversations calmly. So up until that point, I really struggled with just being totally activated. And then that fight or flight, I guess I would perceive these conversations as being a threat to my survival.
Exactly. So when you find yourself in that mode and someone has pushed you into what is a crucial conversation for yourself, the best thing you can do is to notice that you're in the fight or flight syndrome and say, I am experiencing very strong emotions about this issue. Kind of surprised me, but there's something here. I'd like to reschedule this conversation at a time that works best for both of us. Could I get back to you? That's the best thing you can do. Because then when you sit down and have that conversation, both of you know what needs to be discussed, and you are in a much calmer place. So let's talk about a couple of things here. Here's what we give up if we don't take the initiative to have a crucial conversation. You give up the ability to have an honest and authentic discussion about the real issue. And what the real issue might be is sometimes buried underneath our emotional reaction to the particular symptom. For example, with you and your wife sharing the groceries, she could be very upset because you're not being responsive to her, but the core issue might be something else. When you give up the ability to have these authentic conversations, you end up walking around the issue. And when you walk around it and can't speak to it, it grows until you have this 800-pound elephant in the middle of the room, and your emotions about that particular issue tend to bleed out onto all other facets of your relationship. And then you need to compromise. You need to compromise your ability to continue in conversation with this person, to be in relationship with this person. And it then diminishes your ability to have a friendship, a working relationship, or in this case, a relationship with your spouse, where you are free to talk about anything because you have this cloud hanging over your heads on this unresolved issue. And like I say, when a pattern of this develops, it makes the issue even more difficult to discuss, because patterns indicate very deep-seated beliefs, perceptions, and core issues that you don't even know that you have. So your lack of having a crucial conversation prevents you from recovering from what could be one incident of you just forgot to pay what you owe on groceries that week, and grows into something much bigger and uglier than what it really started out to be. So when you go into a crucial conversation, there are a number of techniques you can use to increase your success. These suggestions are in addition to using the crucial conversation model, which we'll go over in a bit. So you speak slower and a little softer. The only thing I would remind you is that you don't want to be too deliberate in your pace. Otherwise, it can sound condescending, as if you were a first grade teacher talking to first grade children. You want to use I statements. This is what I believe. This is what I feel. Don't use we, because you are there in that conversation only to speak for yourself. I heard lots of people. No, I believe that. I observed. Ask questions. Asking questions is a skill in and of itself. In a crucial conversation, it's best to ask questions around the edges, meaning instead of saying, well, why didn't you do this? Well, that will get you only one response, and you might not like it, and it's very difficult to recover after that person you're speaking with shuts you down. So ask questions around the edges to get more information on the table.
What is that? So you kind of gave the example of a direct question. Taking that example, how would you reframe, I guess, that question so that it is around the edges?
Sure. So I'm going to role play you speaking to your wife and saying, I'm sorry, I forgot to give you the grocery money this week. I'm curious as to why that is such a critical issue. Why do you get so upset about that? What issues does that trigger? What is behind this? How does that make you feel besides upset at me? What's underneath that feeling of upset?
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. The one thing I run into sometimes, Sarah, and tell me if you hear about this. I don't know if you'd hear of it so much professionally, maybe, but definitely personally, where someone, has read a book like Crucial Conversations or many other books. They're learning some new way of addressing and communicating with someone and having a conversation with someone. And then, so you're learning these things, and then you use them, and you immediately get told that you're trying something new out on me, or you learn that in your latest book type of thing.
Right. It's always very difficult to introduce something new into a current pattern. That will really upset the status quo and get things out of balance pretty quickly. So whether you are introducing a new communications technique, just a new perspective on something, the best way you can integrate that information is to ask permission. I read this book recently, and it gave us some new tips on how to communicate. I think it might be helpful in this situation. Would you have 5 extra minutes at the beginning of our next meeting where I could share some details and see if we might be able to use that in this situation? So the first thing you do is you ask permission. The second thing you do is to tell your story. What attracted me to this book, what I learned in this technique was why I thought it would be so helpful to this situation is. So you give it an introduction, and then you softly share it, meaning you share a little information, you ask questions to make sure they're still engaged. So do you think that would work? I thought this particular technique would be effective when we're talking about this. What do you think? How does this land with you? Does this language resonate that they're talking to? One of the things to check when you are learning something new or introducing new material is to ask people, how do you resonate with the language this author is using? Does that connect for you? And if it connects, then you're dealing with a deeper level of understanding than if it doesn't connect. If it doesn't connect, then you have to go back and explain it with a different language other than what the author used.
Thank you. That gives me, I guess, some more technique and some good guidance on doing that. Because as you know, Sayre, I am a big time reader, and I'm constantly learning and trying to synthesize and then add into my life what I'm learning. I really try not to just read a book and then set it down. I used to do that. Now I try to apply it and see, not just think about how it might fit into my life, but actually apply some of the lessons and utilize some of the learning. And that's been probably one of my biggest challenges, is especially with my wife and my daughter, introducing these new ideas and techniques to have better conversations, to gain a better understanding, and doing it in a way that I'm not sounding condescending, like you said. So I appreciate that input on that. Go ahead.
One additional thought on that, Jeff. You want to make the new material or the new approach you're introducing to be an asset, to appear as if it is a better tool than what you already know, rather than something out of left field. Because it's very distracting when you do that, when you're talking about an important or issue or a crucial conversation. The reaction is, well, why is he talking about this? I thought we were going to talk about this very important issue. And now I am judging your new idea based on the fact that it doesn't appear that you know why we were going to sit down and talk. Here was our crucial conversation. Here was the important issue. Why do you want to talk about something different? So the brain moves much slower than we think sometimes, and you just have to take it slower and try repeating some of the information and introduce it over a longer period of time.
Yeah, as you just said that, I thought about, I tried to kind of think a little bit about what it would be like on the other side of that, and how my wife or my daughter is feeling. And I bet because they maybe haven't had, we haven't had real great conversations always in the past. And and like you said, most of the time conversations like this are more dialogues, and they get more heated, and it's more about trying to convince the other person or one up the other person. So when someone just out of the blue introduces maybe a new technique that they learn, no matter what they may be thinking about it, like, this could actually help us, if you're on the other side of that, it could almost look like, oh, this person is introducing something new to stay on top. And that could
Exactly.
activate them then into a fight or flight response. And you're absolutely right. Once you're in that, and that little reptilian part of your brain, the amygdala, gets activated, our ability to really think creatively and clearly goes out the window. And we're really just kind of tunnel visioned in that moment on just surviving. And
Yep.
unfortunately, what evolution has brought us to, we grew up with that fight or flight. Our species grew up with that fight or flight because it was real. There were lots of threats that would threaten us and our survival, like, leaves rustling in the woods, in the jungle. Well, it could be, maybe the wind, it could be a bird, or it could be a tiger. And boy, you don't want to be wrong, because if you're wrong one time, and that could be the end of you.
Yep.
And then that carried over into, verbal kind of threats. We've taken, and money, when somebody, I know for me, like the first moment that, maybe I'm getting some money taken away, or something all of a sudden is going to cost me more money than I had anticipated. Something sudden happens that's a threat to my survival, because I think, tying money to my survival.
That's exactly right. And you can see from the example you just gave that in conversations with your wife and daughter, when you bring a new technique in, wouldn't it be rather natural for them to think you're automatically guilty? You are the one to blame for this, because you're coming into the conversation and wanting to talk about something different other than what we agreed to talk about. So take that, mister.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I know that we're going to get into and a deliberate discussion on the steps. Before we do, though, one of the things that I want to kind of talk about a little bit is, okay, I've learned all about crucial conversations. How can this work if the other person doesn't know how to have a crucial conversation?
Sure. The way it can work is that you introduce it in a step-by-step format. It will not be a crucial conversation unless both of you understand what the steps are. That will blow up in your face. So you have to take the time to educate them on what a crucial conversation is. Pardon me. When you use it, and what the steps are. And if you have to diagram that, or you might be able to go to Vital Smarts and see if there's any podcasts on it or videos on it. I don't know if they have videos on YouTube or not, and help people understand what it is. You're not going to be perfect at this the first time you do it. So as long as there's an agreement, like when you're teaching someone how to play a card game, you usually play the first couple of hands down, so you can show the person what you're doing, why you did it, what the strategy is behind it. And so if you use that same type of approach to your first couple of crucial conversations until people get comfortable with it, I think that would work really well.
Yeah. All right. So maybe that's a great time to segue then into the steps.
Sure.
You mentioned that it's important that we know the steps going in, but then that we're able to communicate and demonstrate those steps to the other party in our crucial conversations. So just go into it.
Well, the first step is a real tough one because it starts with us. It starts with our own heart. And this means you need to know exactly what you want out of this conversation. So for example, with your wife or daughter in issue you're discussing in your living environment right now, or in your relationship, in a family situation, I would think that what you really want is to keep the relationship whole, to stay in a good place with that relationship. Perhaps that requires that you have to reset the table, that you have to clear the decks and kind of declare, okay, we need to start over on this particular issue. So maybe resetting the table is one of your goals. correcting a misunderstanding. The next thing you have to do in starting with your heart is you have to know, what do you want for the other person? I want my wife to understand that no matter if I forget to pay her for the groceries for an entire week, I do not think less of her for asking me for it. I want her to know she is completely loved and secure, even though she is out that money for a few days. I want her to know she can always come and remind me about this without fear of an argument or repercussions, okay? And then the third thing in starting with your heart is, what do you want for the relationship? So using the grocery money discussion as an example, maybe what you really want for the relationship is to be able to get past this being an issue. Move forward. What would that future look like? Okay. So that the next step is to stay focused and committed to what you want, no matter what. This means you have to stay away from making yourself right and the other person is wrong. Well, you know, honey, I mean no harm by this. I'm just preoccupied and I don't think about it. And then I forget about it. And then it's 5 days later. Okay. That doesn't mean you stayed in conversation on that. You're making her wrong by not acknowledging the fact that it's important to her to have that repayment happen on the day she pays for the groceries. Avoid storytelling. Well, you know, this is so hard for me to remember. It's just the last thing on my list. And you know, I'm so busy doing all of these other things. And you've got to admit, those things are more important. They're more timely than paying you the grocery money immediately the day you come home with the groceries. That's a story you're making up in your head. And you have to stay committed to remaining in relationship versus shifting into that fight or flight mode. And let me tell you, you know this, Jeff, because we've already spoken about it here, but you can go into the fight or flight mode in a nanosecond. When a particular word is mentioned, or all of a sudden this conversation immediately connects in your mind to some other issue that you have discussed or that you're currently processing right now. So no matter how much you are committed, you also have to know you're still a human being and you have a reptilian brain. And so then you have to slow the pace of that conversation down. Take a moment to say, okay, I hear what you're saying. Give me just a minute to hear that. I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Okay, I'm experiencing some emotion around that. Give me a minute. Let me calm myself down and then move forward. So the next step is what the authors of Crucial Conversations call avoiding the sucker's choice. And the sucker's choice is an either or issue. Either you pay it now, or I'm not going to do the grocery shopping anymore, let's say. We often see things, especially when we're in a reactive mode, when we're in that fight or flight situation. We see the world as black and white. We catastrophize. It is either this great or we're all going to die and the world is going to heck in a handbasket. You know, we see these polar opposites, if you will. And I will tell you, in a world of infinite possibilities, there is always more solutions to your problem than you can possibly think of.
Yeah, you know, John Maxwell says that, I think, brilliantly. Is he talks about creativity and flexibility. Mm-hmm. And creativity is knowing that there's always an answer, and flexibility is knowing that there's always more than one answer.
Yep.
And I, you know, as I think through that, when we bring that mentality to our conversations, if we're in this crucial conversation where there's some disagreement or we perceive some disagreement and we're not aligned, it's going into that, I think, with the notion that we want to maintain our relationship, and that no matter what problem we're going to have a conversation about, there's always an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always more than one answer. And so let's be creative and flexible. And we can't do that when we're having a knockdown drag out. I mean,
That's right.
Going into fight or flight automatically, from my experience and from everything I've learned, takes us out of the ability to create.
That's right.
And moves us more into the world of violence, right? Because that's pretty much, and I think we're going to talk about that too, you know, the way that people will react violently in these conversations, not necessarily, you know, punching and physical, but with their behavior, either being silent or attack, verbally attacking.
Right. And the other thing I'd like to add in this sucker's choice, you know, when you go into fight or flight, that in itself is a sucker's choice. That is either or. Either I'm going to stay here and fight or I'm going to leave. Okay. And what makes this even more difficult in the world we live in today is that so much is in flux. So much is changing. Many times we're going to have crucial conversations, or the need to have a crucial conversation around things where we absolutely don't know. Well, I don't know if you're going to be able to live on campus when you go to college this fall. I don't know if you should do your general prep classes, English 101, etc., on campus. Why wouldn't you do those at home or do them online? I don't know if my job is going to come back, if my industry is going to recover. So it's even more difficult and more important to have crucial conversations right now. So you cannot get past a crucial conversation until you can say yes and. Yes, I understand you want payment on the day I bring the groceries home, or you bring the groceries home. And I don't know if I can always do that. Where do we go next? What's a new solution? Okay, so this means that you coming into the conversation have to be open to change. What are the additional possibilities, opportunities, solutions that you can bring into the conversation as a possibility?
How important is the yes and versus the yes but?
Yes, but is a nice way of saying either or. Yes, but is an either or statement. It has to be yes and. And whenever people say yes, but, I always correct them and say yes and.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I've really been working hard on just taking that word but out of my vocabulary and find that it does lend itself to better conversations with people when I take the but out. I always heard that, you know, when we say but, we basically said everything that came before that is untrue. You're right, but meaning, well, you're not really right.
Well, here's the thing with but. We use but as a clarifying statement. Yes, all that's true, but my point's more important. But I have to be right. But, and the fact of the matter is, we all live in a duality where many, many, many things that seem to be in conflict are all true at the same time. So it's, you can say but all day long, but it's not going to change.
And it's not going to change,
right? Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So we got the yes and.
Yeah. So let's move on to violence and silence. So the thing with a crucial conversation, to stay in a crucial conversation, you have to keep it safe. Because when you are safe, you can speak to the issue, you can say anything you want. When you don't feel safe, you can't stay in conversation. You devolve into two monologues. It can turn into an argument. And if you had a crucial conversation that has failed, the stakes are even higher, exponentially higher for a second crucial conversation. So let's talk about what's violence and what's silence. First of all, the characteristics of when we don't feel safe in a crucial conversation is, someone pounded their fist on the table, or they were wildly gesturing with their hands in very threatening movements, or emotional reactions. People are crying. People shut down. And we don't feel safe when people shut down because all of a sudden they have taken all their cards off the table and you have no idea where they're coming from. And behavioral reactions. They could be cursing at you. They could be yelling at you.
Name calling, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there are two different paths when people move out of safety. They're silent, meaning they're using several different techniques. One is called masking, where you kind of sugarcoat it. We might call it passive aggressive in Minnesota, where you kind of couch things. Yes, I completely understand what you're saying. And you can tell by the sound of my voice that I'm being sarcastic, and yeah, I get it, but that doesn't carry water with me. I don't agree with that. We could also avoid a particular aspect of the conversation, or we could withdraw.
Silent treatment.
Silent treatment. At that point, you need to stop the conversation, get back into mutual purpose, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, and then move forward. The other way you fall out of safety is through violence, and we've kind of covered some of these. The verbal strategies of violence, as defined in the Crucial Conversations model, are when you are trying to convince, control, compel the other person. And the less persuasiveness is a technique that is less than convincing, controlling, or compelling, that can be equally as damaging. Well, I'm just trying to persuade you to see my side of the story. When you hear that, you know the person really isn't listening to your side of the story. They are not listening to understand. And for people who have a strong sales background, or are highly influential people, they fall into this and not even realize it. Which brings us to identifying your style under stress. One of my styles under stress is to persuade. I am very articulate, and I can come at an issue from 1,000 different angles to try to convince you that I'm right. Even if I speak slower, use I statements, and follow all the rules. That's my style under stress. And actually, if you go to the Vital Smarts website, I believe they still have a test you can take online that helps you identify what your style under stress is. That test is also included in the Crucial Conversations book that you can just tally the results for yourself.
Yeah, just real quick, Sarah, I did an episode a couple episodes ago with Dr. Yvette Erasmus. Do you know Yvette?
Mm-hmm.
And
I know of her.
She introduced me to Marshall Rosenberg has a definition of violence that I think really fits into what you're talking about. And it basically says that anytime you try to get someone to do something out of fear or consequences or promise of a reward. So that's kind of like the compelling and
yes.
Well, I can't remember the other words you used, but compelling somebody against, I think she summarized it for extrinsic reasons rather than intrinsic reasons.
And here's the thing. Think about how often we do that just for the sake of speed. I have to get this done. I have to talk to you about this. We've got to get this solved.
Mm.
And that's what's so difficult with crucial conversations. You have to be able to take your time with this. And when you have issues that fall into the crucial conversations category of where opinions vary, stakes are high, and emotions are running strong, it's very easily to speed up these conversations. What we have to remember is when you want to stay in conversation with people, whether it is a conversation or not, we have to have the time to listen to people and stay engaged. First of all, if we did that, we'd have far less need to have crucial conversations because we would create better understandings with each other. In the name of speed in life and all the distractions that we manage, we shortcut good conversation techniques and often move into convincing, controlling, or compelling people just to get the job done and be able to move forward.
I think that's a really good point about speed and being in a hurry. In fact, I know one negotiation tactic that I learned about as I was studying negotiation is that one side will often impose a deadline, and they're typically arbitrary. What do you think about deadlines when it comes to having crucial conversations? Is there any part of having a deadline? Should that be involved in these crucial conversations to make sure that you're moving towards getting things done?
The one thing I will say for the good of setting deadlines in these types of conversations, and I do recommend that you use it when you are still able to keep in mutual purpose in these conversations, is that it helps you prioritize. When you give someone a deadline, they are faced with a decision to go, okay, what do I really, really, really want? I'll compromise on these other things, but I know for sure what it will take for me to stay in relationship is for us to talk or preserve only these two things because these are my absolute priorities.
Okay, that sounds really good, and I get, to not have these deadlines. Another question I have is, if you're having a crucial conversation with someone and then you notice that they're getting upset or angry or they're just being activated, how do you stop, I guess, and address that? What's the step?
Oh, you can actually use it through that same technique called noticing and calling it out. So let me demonstrate. Wow, Jeff, that point really got a very emotional response from you. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? I noticed your anger, or I noticed your sadness and just overall emotion, whatever it might be. Can you tell me what's behind that? And how is that impacting our discussion today? If I wouldn't ask that question, I would have missed the chance to bring you completely back into the conversation, to get you out of the fight or flight mode, and to get some very pertinent information on the table, which may have a tremendous impact in solving for this issue. And you have to remember, if you are just communicating to me about a topic, you are going to make your point, and I'm going to have emotions, and you're going to ignore those emotions because those emotions aren't something you want to know more about. You want to know more about why I can't meet the deadline, why I can't meet the need, and you're going to tell me what you do need or what the deadline is, and that's all you want to hear about. That's communication. In a conversation, you're talking to the whole person. You're committed to staying out of the fight or flight modes, and you want to move forward with that individual. They're important to you. A working relationship, a family relationship, a friendship. It's very different.
All right, we're getting close to the end of our hour. We're probably just a little bit over the hour. Let's wrap this up. What's the end game here? What's the, I guess, solution? You talked about mutual purpose. How does that tie into this?
So it's time to find a solution to move forward. So how do you do that in a way where you have mutual purpose, where you are happy with the solution and the other person is happy with the solution as well? Maybe for different reasons, but you're both satisfied. So to move towards a solution, first of all, you need to be committed to it from the get-go in the conversation. Recognize the purpose behind the strategy. So let's say the strategy, back to you splitting the grocery money with your wife. The strategy is for you to pay her no later than 24 hours after she has paid for the groceries. And so there's going to be a checklist on the refrigerator, or she's going to send you a text on your phone the day she buys the groceries and how much you owe. And you are committed to paying her within 24 hours. And if you can't think of a mutual purpose when you go into the conversation or when you're ready to create the solution, then you have to invent it. So then the last phase of a crucial conversation is brainstorming. So how do we solve this? And then, given the fact that you created this solution through a crucial conversation, you are both more committed to maintaining the solution because you had the conversation in relationship. And you know that to keep the relationship solid, you both have to be committed to this new strategy, this new way forward, or abide by an agreed upon idea that one of you had in the conversation.
Well, that's going to do it. I apologize again for the abrupt ending to the show. Technical difficulties kind of mess things up a little bit there, but I think that's just the day and age we're living in, is learning to roll with the flow a little bit. I hope you learned a little bit about having these important high-stakes conversations with coworkers, bosses, friends, you name it. This can work in all areas of your life, and hopefully Sayre gave you some good points and some good direction, and you can start putting these into practice, because I think this really fits into hashtag Lida and love is the answer. By having these types of conversations, we really get to demonstrate and put love into action, and that's what it's all about, right? If you have questions, if you want to dive deeper into this, I'm here. You can get a hold of me on our Facebook page, the Lida podcast page. Just look for it on Facebook. You can go to the website, www.lidaforlife.com, and you can connect then to Facebook there. You can get involved, start a conversation, send me a message. That's the important thing, is that we keep talking about this. You can go, I'll put in the show notes, like I said, you'll have all the links to Vital Smarts, to the book. If you're interested, buy the book. That link will take you right there on Amazon, and you can buy it right from there. It is a fantastic book that will help you immeasurably have these crucial conversations. So I highly recommend it for everyone who's wanting to sharpen their saw a little bit when it comes to having high-stakes conversations. Just real quick before we wrap up today, I want to invite you to subscribe to the Take 5 Friday newsletter. That comes out every Friday. So if you'd enjoy getting an update on upcoming episodes, if you'd enjoy hearing about some of the books I'm reading, some of the people that I've met and discovered over the past week, I always include a cool quote that I've been thinking about this week. If you'd enjoy that, it's a short little read. Go ahead and head on over to the Lida website, www.lidaforlife.com, and subscribe, and I'll make sure that you get that every Friday so that you can take a break during the day. Thanks again for joining me this week. Have a wonderful week, and remember, love is the answer. So go out there and just love one another. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the #Lita podcast, hosted by Jeff Connor. We hope you are now inspired to say love is the answer. Now go out and change the world.
Can you tell me you want more for you and me? Give me something to hope for, something to believe. Can you tell me you want more?